Welcome to the On the Rise podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer. All right, welcome back On the Rise podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into yet another episode of the On the Rise podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Dyer. I've got another amazing guest with me today, as I do always. I have David Morgan. David, welcome to the show.
Jeremy, it's good to be with you. It's always good to get a new interview, and this is a first for me, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to chopping it up with you and discussing a topic that I think everybody should know a little bit more about. Before we get started, David's a globally recognized precious metals consultant, a publisher of what's called the Morgan Report, which is a leading investment newsletter focused on building and preserving wealth through sound money principles. David, I'm not really doing your bio much justice here. I'd like you to kind of let us know a little bit more, about what you're up to, maybe a little bit more about your journey, what you're focused on today, etc.
Yeah, well, I'll try to be brief, Jeremy, but I was interested in money from like as a kid, and I was just at that age, and my age now, where the coin has changed from 90% silver coins, which ran through inclusive 1964, and in 1965 started minting what I call the Johnson slugs. This is after the Kennedy assassination. And I noticed that because I got 25 cents a week allowance. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. But none of the adults seemed to pay any attention. I wouldn't say at that point in my life I knew I'd be writing a financial newsletter for a living. But I was fascinated about money and markets. So I started trading stocks at 16, which is not legal, but it is legal if your parents sign a document in California. That's where we were at the time, called the Uniform Gift of Minors Act. I was so intrigued with markets, but I said, okay, fine. He signed the document, and I was trading Dow Jones stocks at age 16. So obviously I wanted to go into finance. Told him that when he said, what are you going to do with your life? I said, I want to do something in finance. He blew up his stockbroker, taking him for a ride or whatever. And he said, absolutely no. I mean, he really was hard on me. And I said, okay. I read the career guide of the World Book Encyclopedia. I was kind of a nerd, always have been somewhat. And I read that and I said, wow, this airline pilot thing sounds really, really cool. So I'm 16 years old and I say, hey, Dad, I want to start flying. And I did. So I really went into a flying career, which was, successful. But I was still in the markets, always fascinated about the markets. And as luck would have it, fate, higher power, whatever, I won the engine runs on the B-1 bomber, and I was a crew member on the B-1. The test pilot and the co-pilot were all waiting in the truck for the crew to get the airplane ready, which could take a long time. Pulled out this financial newsletter writer and started reading this stuff to the other pilot. But I'm just a 22-year-old kid with an aeronautical engineering degree and a bunch of flight hours listening. But here's kind of my passion. So I went on from there. I learned about the business, got into it, started becoming more and more involved. So I kind of moonlighted the whole way through the aircraft industry in some kind of financial capacity with an insurance license and things like that. And once I left that industry, I went full time. So I think you can read the rest on my website. Very passionate about what I do. Very, very strong on honesty, integrity, and truth in the system. And I mean all systems, but it really stems from money, because if you believe what I believe, money is power. And if the money powers control the money, they control the people. And you don't have to look too far past the Congress critters and the Senatards to see that money can buy a lot of votes and a lot of political persuasion.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that would disagree with that, what you just said. So let's just dive into this. I want to rip the Band-Aid off and go right to the jugular. I know that you've been studying precious metals and, the monetary system for decades. What problem, was it that you were really trying to solve at the time?
Well, what I discovered early on, and when I, decided I wanted to be a financial newsletter writer, was, through recorded history, any, first of all, my three famous words, anyone's watched any interview probably heard me say, all fiat fails. There's never been a time in recorded history when a paper-backed or a paper system, unbacked currency doesn't fail. It's a 100% record so far. But what I noticed was that it's always been like a country or something. In other words, like the Weimar Republic, it could have gone to Austria. It was horrible, and the Germans affected other countries. But it was like kind of isolated relative to the whole world. Now you go to Zimbabwe, the same thing. You go to Argentina, that fails about every 10 years, same thing. It's this country specified area. But this time it's the US dollar that could or might fail, which is global. That means if the dollar goes, everything goes. And that was my mission. How do I wake up enough people to at least protect themselves, maybe protect their community, perhaps work through this as we unravel into the next system? And whether or not we're going to use precious metals in the next system remains to be determined. I'm about 100% that silver will not be possible. It'd have to be revalued very much higher and have the correct gold silver ratio to become money again. But even gold, I don't think that the bankers will put gold into play in the new system. I really think they want a blockchain system very similar to what the Chinese have been using for the last decade or more, and really have seasoned meaning it's been tested, retested, tweaked. The betas are over, beta testing's over, and they know how it works and how it works really, really well. And now all you need to do is adopt that on a, let's say, global basis, and then we're in a new system.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I'd like to double down maybe on this kind of discussion around, fiat money. What is it that most people fundamentally misunderstand about fiat money, inflation, and how purchasing power is really deteriorated and lost over time?
I think the main fact is one, true finance and money isn't taught in school. And I've got a degree in finance, and I know darn well they don't teach you anything about money and finance. And I got a master's in it. Now I'm not patting myself on the back. Believe me, I'm not a big go to college guy anymore. I used to be, but I'll be back on track here, Jeremy. So I think the fundamental thing is there's a difference between a currency and a money. Money is basically God given or nature's way. And throughout history, depending, no matter where the uh, the population was, it's not in every case everywhere always, but in all cases across the board, sooner or later, people themselves determine gold and silver to be money, not governments. Now governments get involved and can take it over and all that, tax it, whatever. But basically, from the dawn of time onward, it's been she cells, it's been salt, it's been cow hides, it's been tally sticks, it's been a lot of things. But the number one and two means of exchange that people trust and has worked the best and has stood the test of time, thousands of years, are the precious metals. So I think that's number one. If that was taught in school, then people would say, well, wait a minute, why don't we earn, our living in precious metals? And then someone like me that's a bit of an academic would raise their hand and say, wait a minute, Article 10, Section 8 of the Constitution says no state can do anything except gold and silver in payment of debt. And that's why I've always loved, I'm going to digress for a minute, but it's one of my jokes. It's like I want to call up our tax assessor here in my local county and say, I think I frauded you. What do you mean? I go, well, I've been paying my property taxes with this privately controlled script by a bunch of Europeans. And I realize constitutionally I'm breaking the law. I'm supposed to pay. It is a debt, isn't it, sir? Oh, yes, it's a tax. It's a debt. Well, in that case, I think I haven't been paying in gold and silver. I've been using this private script by a bunch of European bankers. What do you mean? Well, that Federal Reserve note I've been sending you. Of course, it'd blow his mind, but you get my point. So I'll come back on my sick sense of humor. But these are the kind of things that I think if enough people were educated, it maybe wouldn't be where we are now. And there's still people such as myself, and I'll give a shout out to the Citizens for Sound Money, which I'm on their board for, the Sound Money movement. More and more people are waking up, of course, as the currencies depreciates. People learn pretty quickly. Wait a minute, why is it? And of course, a lot of people are taught, well, all we need is the right minimum wage. We just set a minimum wage and a person can make a living, then that'd be good, that'd be fair, and it sounds wonderful. But if you know what I know, you would think through that and realize when I started as a degreed engineer, I made $6 an hour. Now the minimum wage is like 15 in this state, like double, and you can't live on 15 an hour. But if it was $1 a day or $1 an hour in silver, you'd be very you'd do very well right now. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'll give it back to you.
No, that makes total sense. And it's interesting at the time of this podcast recording, the very beginning of January, I just heard that the city of LA is looking to pass a $30 per hour minimum wage. So I remember just not too long ago, there was lots of political discussion amongst the states as it related to increasing minimum wage to 15. And now we're talking about 30. I would like to unpack a little bit. I think it would be remiss for us not to unpack the central bank, who, at the time of this podcast recording, believes or insists, maybe if we could use that word, that inflation is quote unquote under control. Yet everyday costs, certainly tell a different story to the average consumer. Where is it that you think that this official narrative that's coming out of the central bank really breaks down?
Well, I think the first one is, using logic. If you look at the way the CPI was calculated in 1980 and you use those same metrics today, the true inflation rate's over 10%. The other thing is, it's a number and the government produces their own number. And so what do? Well, there's lots of things I won't go into because they're, going down the rabbit hole too far, but hedonic indexing, all these ways. And of course, they obfuscate the fact because they take out of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, two things that are most critical to human life: food and energy. What a concept. So we take out food and energy, everything that most of us buy every week, take that out of the equation. Now you've skewed the math. It's new math. So there's lots of ways that the government calculates their number, and their number is calculated the way they do it. Is it accurate? Well, for them it is. And of course, they broadcast it everywhere. So you feel like, well, wait a minute. A lot of people have much, much less trust in authority than they used to. And that's valid. But looking at their number and you think, well, wait a minute, it seems like it's higher than that for me, but maybe it is under 3%. And heck, my stock portfolio is going up, 10% a year. And, I have been getting, 3 or 4% a year increase in my salary. And, I should be okay. But in the reality of things, we're playing on a tilted pool table. We're not really getting the truth out for people to truly understand. And of course, the more you are at the margin, the minimum, that $30 an hour just to survive, the more you see it because you have what's called this, zero disposable income. And maybe there's not enough cash left at the end of the month to fulfill all your obligations, and you don't have anything extraordinary. It's basic stuff, and you're still not making it. So this is what happens during the great inflations. It's been repeated over and over, and I've got to add, because I want it in the mix if you want to talk about it. There's an absolute correct and detectable correlation between the debasement of a currency and the debasement of the moral structure of the society that it serves. And the more they make the money corrupt and more worthless, the more worthless the value structure takes place in society at large. And the bigger key than that is when the wage discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots is so astronomically large that usually portends a revolution. Now, I don't want to see I would like to see a revolution, but let me quantify that in an intellectual revolution. The old adage that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. The idea is that we collectively have more power than they do. And maybe we just start trading in silver and leave their European script with US printed on it from our treasury, but they buy it for cost of printing like 10 cents a note, whether it's a 1 note, a 5 note, a 50 note, a 100 note. They pay $10 or 10, they pay whatever it is, 20 cents per note, 30 cents, a dollar. I don't know what the price is. It's low. They lend it at face value plus interest. I mean, that's counterfeiting, but it's monopolized by the power of the government to let them do that under the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. So I threw a lot at you, but the main point I want to emphasize, but it's up to you, it's your program, is that you see the disruptions, the malaise in the society that it doesn't even pay to go to work. I'm not making it. Maybe I should go on welfare. Or the people that qualify for food assistance that have jobs. I mean, this is near the end, is what I'm saying. And you can see this social breakdown. Could have more coffee. I'm slurring my words today, but you have to have a system that works for everybody, and that's based on integrity. That a dollar is a dollar, and you know that 10 years from now, that dollar is going to be worth what it is today. And we haven't had that since we went off the gold standard August 15th, 1970.
I'm Zach Captainstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investors. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And certainly I don't hope for any type of a physical revolution, but I definitely get what you're saying there. Instead, we're praying for a revival in my home. I'd like, from a macro perspective, if you don't mind, David, is to talk about why this current inflationary cycle that we're in today is different from maybe historic inflationary cycles that we've gone through, or are we just simply repeating history?
Well, I think it's different because of, the media and technology. I mean, you have instant access to anyone, anywhere in the world. The news cycle is 24/7. There's all kind of, chat boxes, and Facebook pages, and social media all over the place. So you can get a lot of information outside of the mainstream and make up your own mind. A lot of it is actually controlled. But I think what's different this time is the speed of information and also the ability to counteract it. I mean, when I started buying precious metals as a kid, I mean, it was pretty difficult to find a coin dealer and, walk in there or whatever. Now, with the internet, I mean, anyone anywhere can basically find a website and buy precious metals and have them delivered to their home or office. So I think that's an aspect that maybe the powers that be are not really happy with, but nonetheless, it exists. I think the other thing is, as I said earlier, it is global, but it's global from the aspect the dollar goes down, most everything will go along with it, and also the ability for the powers that be to be able to mitigate the problem. I mean, when I saw the 2008 financial crisis, we were very close to it really going down, but the Fed was smart enough and quick enough to put in legislation that brought up enough liquidity, meaning printing money, to keep the system going, and they did it to the extent required. So not only was the bill passed in Congress, but a lot of money was shipped to European banks, kind of off the books, that we only discovered later, just to keep the whole system alive. So as long as people accept the currency, the game can continue. It's just as the currency breaks down further and faster at the end, people start to realize I've got to do something. And the precious metals usually precede that. And since we got silver up like 140%, I think maybe it's in that range. Maybe it's 170. I forget the exact number. Last year, we're in the new year right now. Gold was up substantially, but half as good as silver. And platinum was actually up the same amount, or very nearly so, as silver. That portends what's ahead. In other words, if you just looked at it from a silver aspect, you lost over half of your purchasing power last year if you didn't own silver.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I really appreciate your making that connection between the debasing of fiat currency and the debasing of values and morals across the fabrics, of our country. I don't think that that's something that is certainly being discussed on the main stage. And happy to hear further commentary there if you would be interested. But I also want to make sure, that we have an opportunity to talk specifically about what makes silver specifically, since that's your area of expertise. What makes silver uniquely positioned compared to gold or other hard assets in this current cycle?
Well, I'll go from the last to first. So, what makes silver different is that there are no central bank holdings of silver. There's lots of central bank holdings of gold. Now, when you say banks, there's such a thing as what's called a bullion bank. And bullion banks are banks that specialize in precious metals. And the bullion banks pretty much have a handle on the management of the precious metals price moves for the most part. And there's arguments back and forth. I won't go into them. But really, since the central banks don't and haven't looked at silver as a monetary asset, yet the Romance languages, all 14 of them, the word silver and the word money is synonymous. I mean, if I went into Mexico and said plata es no plata, I'd be saying that silver isn't money or money isn't silver. They wouldn't know what the heck I'm talking about. But yet you ask a North American or somebody, well, silver is only an industrial metal. Well, it's a very significant, essential, non-replaceable industrial metal. That's a fact, but it also serves as money. In fact, it legally is money. I could take a mercury dime, which is 90% silver right now, into Walmart, put it together with my final bill of what's $101.10, put that mercury dime on their hand and the exact change, and there's no way it could refuse it. You know, of course, I'm giving them whatever the dime's worth today. What I don't know what it is, $7 or something, fiat wise. But the point is that it's still legally money because it's economically not money because it isn't exchanged in everyday life at its current value, and that's why it's held in high regard by silver stackers and others that see what's coming. So I think that was it. The previous question was more about the moral side. I think looking into more of the, get your aluminum foil hat on, but I think a lot of it's based on fact. Some of it's exaggerated. Is that the adage divide and conquer really applies because in order for the few to control the many, you've got to make the mindset stick. And if the mindset is look at our differences rather than what we have commonly, you've got us fighting amongst ourselves, paying attention to social media posts, what people are wearing, what they're eating, what shows they're watching, what your football team's doing, how much water you drank today, on and on and on it goes. When really, what we want is we want good communication between each other and things that really matter. And I love the word value because they use value different than the word price. And I value things this way. It's not what you have, it's what you have. And in a documentary I did, we talk about later, try to emphasize the spiritual side of money and humanity, which means what you have is what you have in your head and your heart and your hands. That's what you have. And if you have high integrity, regardless of what your job is, you interact with people from your authentic self, you are in the most powerful position you can be. But we're not taught that. We're taught just the opposite. You're nothing. You just came from the primordial ooze. You evolved to this. And what you have to be successful is everything outside of yourself. It's got to be the right job, the right car, the right house, the right neighborhood, the right music collection, the right movie watching, the right friends, the right nightclubs, and on it goes. So we've really been taught everything upside down. And that's where I would argue with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think that we have to put the pyramid upside down and get the self-realization from the get-go once your kids are born and teach them you really are enough. You won the greatest race in the history of mankind. You won the sperm race. Excuse me for being crude, but out of those, hundreds of thousands, you were the winner. You are here. You are produced, and you have meaning just by being here. You don't have to prove it. And then you get that kind of consciousness in our childhood and say you can be whatever you want, and not teach them what kind of a job do you want. Teach them what kind of business do you want to own, or what kind of contribution you want to make on a volunteer basis, or what's your purpose. And you see, we've got this thing just flipped upside down, and I'll give it back to you. But look, if you look for everything to be outside of yourself, you're not looking in the right place. Even Jesus said the kingdom lies within. I think we've got to get solid with ourselves and each other. And as you said, a revival. We need a revival in this country, everywhere in the world. We need a revival that says, look, I honor you just because you're you. We don't agree on everything, but we have enough in common that we know that we want to have trust with each other when we do commerce. When I buy something from you, I'm making the deal and we both win. In true exchange, I buy that coat from you, Jeremy, because I'd rather give you $40 for your used Carhartt and you rather have the $40 for it. So you feel you have benefited and I feel, no, I benefited. That's a free market.
Yeah, this is so powerful. And listening audience, hit the rewind button, go back about 5 minutes. and re-listen to that again. But I just love how David breaks down, kind of, this idea of purpose and self-worth and value, and that really, our value is created in what's in our head, our heart, and in our hands, right? And it's through that authenticity of the individual, right? And our unique, design, that is what gives us value and purpose in life. So I really appreciate that perspective, David. And as we kind of wrap up here, because I'm sure we could continue this conversation for a long time, but I would love for you to give our listening audience a little bit more information, as it relates to this documentary that you produced. If you don't mind, I believe the documentary is called, and I don't want to take it from you, so why don't you go ahead and explain the Silver Sunrise?
Yeah, it was 2.5 years, a little longer than I expected. Uh, it's for free for everyone. The comment sections are open, and it's at silversunrise.tv. So if you just type in your browser, Silver Sunrise, one word, .tv, just click the go button. It's about an hour and a half long. Again, comments are open if you wish to comment. Donations are there. It's paid for, so if you want to donate, fine. I'm not asking for donations. It's probably, I don't know if it's my swan song, but it may be. But it's really about thinking. I'm not trying to persuade anyone to do anything. What I'm trying to do is a massive wake-up call of what we outlined about purpose, authenticity, how valuable you really are, what is true success, and where the money powers have kind of warped us into believing things that really aren't true. That's kind of the purpose of it. As far as getting a hold of me in other ways, themorganreport.com. There's icons at the bottom of the page for all the social media. I don't do much other than X. Myself and my webmaster are the only two that have access to my X file or X postings. I look at it as Web 1.0 because a lot of financial news that I think is important for anyone to understand or read, I will post it. And I also have the ability to help anyone that's looking to purchase metals. I don't deal myself, but there's a lot of dealers out there that have to pay for a lot of advertising. I have a good friend that's a hedge fund manager that deals in the precious metals. He doesn't advertise, so we pass the savings on.
Yeah, that sounds great. I appreciate that. And David's a very humble individual, but also I would like for you to check, him out, or check out the book, The Silver Manifesto, which David authored. In addition to the fact that it goes without saying, but I'd like to also highlight the fact that David was also featured as a guest on CNBC, Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, and MSNBC. So again, David, we will put the links in the show notes that you described so our listening audience can connect with you further to learn a little bit more about what you're up to. Really appreciate the tremendous value that you've brought us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And listening audience, thank you again for jumping into yet another episode of the On the Rise podcast. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the On the Rise podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the On the Rise podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.